Hello, my name is Jahg and welcome back to another episode of Jahg Teaches Java. Now last time we had our plugin working. We added this plugin YML file, we gave it a test, we made sure that we could use our QC command in game and from the console, and it worked perfectly. There's the message the console gave us saying it couldn't run there, and we ran it correctly in game, and you saw that when we were testing it. So I don't think I've now disconnected from that so that the server's still running there. I'm going to paste in my file as I update it. What we're going to do today is we're going to edit this a little bit, which means we're going to need to make this version something slightly different, so 0.2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to this. Now there are several things I want to add to this. The first is I don't think anybody, just everybody, should be able to use this command. I think it should be specific to ops and eventually to people, which means that they are operators of that server, so admin, staff, that sort of thing, and eventually to add permissions to that so that this particular command could be given to other people, because permissions is the way to go when we want to lock down a plugin so that only a few people could use this command. Other people can use these commands, and so on, which gives admins of servers quite a bit of flexibility in determining who can access what, and to provide like donor levels and various other things related to that. So that's the first thing we're going to do. The second thing is I want this plugin to not just run on myself, because it works perfectly with me, because player, in this case, this sender is always me in game, the person typing the command. I want to tweak it a bit so that it can actually work on someone else. Now that's going to bring in some more of this stuff up here that we haven't talked about yet. So those are the two things I'm going to do. Now the first thing is I'm going to deal with the op thing first. I want only ops to be able to use this particular command from this plugin. We know we've got to be in this sort of area to put this code that we're going to need, because this is where we know it's a player that's using the command and that it's not console. So I'm going to put this here, because if I put it here I can write certain code such as if player dot is op, and you can see that it's in the list, but it doesn't really tell us much about it here. I'm going to fix that in a minute. So is op returns a boolean, and we know what that means because it returns a true or false, just like the whole on command method that we've added here. Lots of these are booleans. In fact, anything beginning with is usually returns a boolean. Is banned, that's a true or false. Is blocking in game, meaning that sword thing that does nothing for me, but never mind, that's a boolean value. Is sprinting, is sleeping, and so on. These are kind of obvious boolean values of some sort. You can see another one here, is permission set, which allows us to use permissions. Get to that later. So all I want to do is if player is op, now we can also write equals true there. Note the double equals when we're comparing two values. If this exactly equals this, then do it. And the single equals when you're just saying set this equal to it. So if player equals op, then I want to do all of this code, and as you can see I'm just putting in braces. You can see the yellow brace down here matches with the one further up now, but the code is all neat. Grr, that's annoying. This goes with that, this goes with that. You can see the tabs are uneven. I'm going to do Control Shift F and it reformats that code for me, or you could just tab it in manually. That works too. Okay, so I now have a bit of code that says, okay, if we're a player, grab that particular player's details, and if they're an op, go ahead and test whether we can do the command. Well, what if they're not an op? They're not going to get any message in game, so I think we're going to put in an else. Now notice this else lines up with the if that matched up with it. So if they're a player, open the brace, do some code, close the brace, else, and then we're into braces again, and it's the braces that determine which bits of code work, just like we had earlier. So the first thing I want to do, or the last thing I want to do for this part, is I want to put sender. Actually, it can be player, can't it? Player dot send message And we want to tell them, sorry, but you can't use this command. In fact, that's exactly what I'm going to put. Sorry, you cannot use this command. There we go. So we've dealt with if they're not an op. Let's try that out first and see what we get. So the first thing I need to do is I need to rebuild my project. I'm just going to choose build, and it will update my Java class files. So my jar file here. So it's created that file for me. I should now be able to copy that in again. It's still 3K in size. It's a very small plugin. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it in the update folder this time. There we go, because my server is currently running and I want it to deal with moving that into the right place. So if I just do a reload here in the server, reload complete, you can see that it's now loaded and enabled version 0.2. There it was disabling my plugin previously. This is a lot more convoluted if there's a lot of plugins. You'll see a lot of messages in the console, but this is really simple. You can see what it's doing. And you can see it's gone from the update folder up here. It's moved it into this location. So again, I should still be not able to do QC in the console, but I should be able to do it in-game if I'm an op, which I am in this particular version because I did that in the first episode. So let's just get back into my server and we'll see that running. So I'll just connect to my local host. There we go. And if we, there we go. Let it load a little bit. I'm currently in creative. Fine. I am an op at the moment, so I should be able to do QC. Now I've switched to that particular game mode. There we go. It's working. If I de-op myself, there we go. That's the command in game or in the console. I should no longer be able to do things like setting the time. Don't have permission. If I try QC, we get my message. Sorry, you cannot use the command. So it's working. We can detect whether someone's an op. Now that's really powerful. You can think of all sorts of situations where that might be necessary. Only allow ops, people in charge of a server, to do certain things with your particular plugin. Maybe it's something massive like World Edit or Nano that allow you to change large chunks of the world. You want just anyone to do that. So that's what we've got with the isOp method that we've used. I'm going to close that because it's a little bit laggy whilst I'm recording. So far so good. We've determined whether the player is an op. You can see the other thing I've been doing is I've been placing in comments that are extremely obvious at this point, but eventually, once we've got a lot more code in here perhaps, these comments are going to allow us to come back and go, oh, I know what that does. So far so good. Now the next thing is, at the moment, QC, this command we've added, is only useful for us. So I can run it and it's going to switch me into creative or it's going to switch me into survival. I want to tweak that a bit so that it allows me to say, switch this other person into creative or switch them into survival, whichever it is. So how could that work? Well, I guess we could have QC as the command and then a player name after it. So you could do QC jahg and it would change me into or out of creative. That would work, but the question is then, how do we get this player name from our command? We don't even know anything about us yet. We don't know whether we are the player we're trying to change. We don't know anything about us. Well, that's where some more of this stuff is going to come in. There's several things up here that I haven't talked about. OnCommand is a method that's built in. We're overriding it to provide our own implementation of a particular command. These things in the brackets at the top of the method are called parameters or arguments. Those two words mean the same thing. There are 4 of them in this case. The first is who is sending this particular command. Is it the console or is it a player? And that's all wrapped up in this variable called sender. And you can see I've used that twice. If you just highlight a variable name, it will highlight the rest of the usages. The second thing is, which command is it that's being used? Now, if I highlight this, nothing shows up. There is only one command. All other commands are sent to other plugins or to Bukkit itself. We are only listening for the QC command. So I don't need any code that uses this directly. I know that it's the QC command. Now, eventually I'm going to need to change that because I'm going to add more commands to the one plugin. One plugin can have multiple commands. WorldEdit has, I think, 50 or 60 different commands. The third parameter is a label. Now, this is the name of the command that's being run. This is the whole command and everything about it. This is the actual label, so I can use this to see, is it the QC command or is it some other command that I've added to the plugin later. We don't need that yet. What we do need is this last one. Whenever you send a command, it can have arguments given to it in-game. So these are kind of arguments themselves. So there could be 0 or there could be unlimited number of these almost. So this is a special array, a set of arguments, each one of which is a string. That means a piece of text. So that's why string label is appropriate, because QC, that's text. It doesn't matter if there's numbers in the command. We could have Q5C, that's a command. Absolutely, that's a string. So args is going to be something we're going to need. Now it has these square brackets. That indicates there could be 0 or more of them. It doesn't say how many, just that there could be more than one of them. And it changes how you use them, really. Now, I'm just going to customize this to be really clunky to start with. I'm going to force people to put a player name here. So it won't work without one. Just so that we can see this code, and we'll rearrange it next time. So, okay, the first thing is we've grabbed the player, the sender. We know who is actually running this command. I guess actually I don't need to do that there. I'm going to move it down a bit. I'm going to need to check whether they're an op, because if they're not ops, they can't use it. And then I need to say, right, who is the player that we're trying to apply it to? Because it's not me anymore, it's somebody else. So how do I figure out who that is? Well, in code, I use this word args with a 0 there. And that gets us to the first argument that was specified to this particular command. So it's this one. 0 is always this first one. If I had something else, I might have a parameter here for game mode. I could say QC, a player name, and then 1, and it would switch me to creative, or 2, and it would switch me to adventure mode. So now this is parameter 0, the player name. This would be parameter 1, the game mode. So maybe I'll leave that there as a thing we might add later on. In fact, I think that might be where we're at the end of this example. So args0 is the player name. Args1 would be the game mode. So how do we use that? Well, it's not an if. I'm not making decisions. If arg0 equals jahg, then do something with it. That wouldn't work in this particular case for various reasons. What I want to do is I want to see whether this player is actually online. You can't switch a player into creative mode if they're not actually on the server. So I need a way of keeping track of the target player. So let's create a variable for it. Player is a class name. Target is the name of a variable. That's it. That's all I can use at this point. I can add more, but that's it. This creates a bit of memory, sets up a bit of memory so that we could store the information about a player. It's exactly what we did here at the top, but I've chosen to call it target. Now we set it equal to something, but even that can't be setting it to jahg and it knows it's me, because that's a string of text. How do I know if they're online? Well, I can ask the server if they're online. There's a method built into all plugins called getServer, and it basically gets you to the top level of the server. And you can ask it what are its plugins, you can ask it what are its what the current time is on that server, you can ask it what which players are online. That's what I want. But I want to get a particular player. If we put a dot at the end of that, it gives us all this information about what we can do with the server. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to get a player. That's exactly what I want to do. Get player exact does something else. I can't determine which I want because this information isn't filling in here. So this is another thing we're going to need to do. We've imported the Bukkit jar file here, but there's extra information that I need. I can't tell how to use these two methods without additional information. That information comes from what's called Javadocs. Now, the Bukkit team have provided Javadocs so that we can make use of them here. I'm going to click Attach Javadoc, and hopefully it's not going to... Oh, there it is. It's going to allow me to specify a remote URL for this. Now, I don't know if it's on the clipboard. It is. There we go. This URL gets you to the Java documentation. In fact, it is a document you can browse with a browser. If I just pop that in here, you can see it gets you to the online version of it. And you can see it's a list very similar to what we saw in this navigation panel in NetBeans. So it gets you to that. I'm going to click OK. And this will allow me to, when I put a dot and click a particular method, it no longer gives us useless information. It tells us something about that particular method. So the getPlayer method gets a player object by a given username. That sounds reasonable. May not return objects for offline players, and we give it a name to look up. Fair enough. What does getPlayerExact do? Well, it's very similar, but it's case insensitive, which is kind of the opposite of what you need. Right? Gets the exact given name, case insensitive. GetPlayer allows you to do partial names, so you could specify half of someone's name. We don't want that. I think I want getPlayerExact. So let's try that. Now, it seems to need a player's name in these brackets, so where's that coming from? args0, that's where it's coming from. So what have we got with this line of code? We're setting aside a bit of memory to store a player, and we're setting it equal to a player's exact name and all their details that the server can give us. It's kind of odd that we can read it backwards. With this username, get the player exact from the server and store it in the target as a player. Right? Lots of things in Java are read backwards. So at this point, we might have a player that we can actually set into a different game mode. So if I actually do this, and I'm going to change my code here to say target in all three of these places. There we are. So instead of changing me, it's going to change the target player, whoever I've specified here. Let's give it a go. Now, I'm going to need to actually test this on someone else. So now we can test this code in our server, but first of all we need to build it. So I'm going to build this particular project. Again, there's nothing in here that's showing up as errors in the margins or on the folders or the files themselves, so there shouldn't be any particular problem. There's our project built, QuickCreative. I should be able to flip to the Finder here and drop my new version, still 3K, into this folder, into the Update folder. There it is. And I will go back here and I'll just do a quick reload. Oh, there we go. And okay, version 0.2. And I should be able to then run this in game and we'll see what we get. Now, we'll either get exactly what we want or we'll get a slightly strange response. Now, I'm currently opt, so I should be able to do /QC and then a name. Now, I'm going to use my own name. There we are. It's working perfectly. If I use someone else's name, like jahgbot, it does nothing, or at least nothing in game, except it tells us it crashed our plugin, and that's absolutely right, it did. You can see a whole heap of information is over there in the console window that says, oh my goodness, there was a problem, unhandled exception, problem with our code, oh dear. It's because the name I specified wasn't online. So it gives us a very detailed error message, but basically we can look at this null pointer exception, and it's pointing at line 38 of our particular plugin. If we take a quick look at that, that's where we try and actually change or we try and retrieve rather, the current game mode. Well, if the player isn't online, then we can't actually do this change. So we have to put another bit of code in here. So we need to make sure that if target does not equal null, that's a special value, meaning no information has been provided. If it's not null, that means we can run our code. So we have a more detailed if statement. I'm going to put an else. I always put them in. Even if I'm not going to put any code in them particularly yet, I'll always put in the else section. I am going to put in it's not sender, it's player I need. I'm going to put in a message. that says that that particular player wasn't online. Now this is how you build up a string of text in one go. So I can put arg0, remember that's the name of the player according to this, plus, then in quotes I can put my message, is not online. There we go. So we're building up a string of text in one go. It's not the most efficient way of building up a string of text, but it'll do for us. So this will say blah 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 is not online. That seems good to me. Now this is a bit, it is understandable code. We say if we are currently a player in game, then grab our own player details. If we are an op, try and grab the name of the player that we're trying to change the game mode for, and if it's not null, meaning that player is online, go ahead and change them. Oh, I missed one of my things here. I need to change that one to target. Thought I did that. Oh well. So we have a bit of code that's going to change me or the target player back and forth between these two. If they're not online, it should bring up this message. Let's give that a go. In fact, that's so different from the previous version, I'm going to modify my version number in the YML file. A quick build or a clean and build will delete the old version to guarantee we get the latest version. Sometimes Windows machines can be a bit finicky, that's a word, about the timestamp that's put on files. So if you rebuild it too quickly, it won't know that it's changed, for instance. So a clean and build guarantees that it will update itself so that it knows it's the latest version. So I've put that into the folder. I'll do a reload. It's totally safe to do a reload after it's already crashed. You can see it's unloaded version 0.2 and loaded 0.3. So now if I switch to the in-game, let's see what we get now. If I now try and change myself, let's just guarantee that is working. Seems to be. If I try and change jahgbot, nope, jahgbot is not online, and our plugin did not crash as indicated here in the console window. No errors. So there we go. That's not at all bad. We are making progress with this plugin. In the next particular section, I think what we'll add is we'll either add the game mode, to allow us to say change this player into this particular game mode, or we'll add permissions. I think we'll do the game mode thing. So thank you very much for watching this section, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.